Hello everyone, if you are new here, my name is Chantel and today is a maintenance day in the garden. Right here I am adding some Hormex, which is a rooting hormone, into the watering can, and I mixed it with about half a gallon of water, and I was watering each of these 17 trees with one watering can that is mixed with the Hormex rooting hormone. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want these trees to grow their roots rapidly so that the tree focuses on growing its roots rather than growing its vegetation in the first season. It's not that I don't want it to grow its vegetation, that is a good thing, but I want it to focus first on growing its roots, because if you have healthy roots, then you are going to have healthy trees. These are the trees between us and our neighbors that are going to create a living fence. And right here you see me taking the tape off of the tree. It was taped to a stake. That is how it came in the pot, and I am removing that tape, and I took the stake and I put it next to the tree. I'm trying to figure out where to put it, but I finally was able to find a place, and then I used some soft rubber coated ties to tie the stake to the tree. And I made sure to tie the stake in a place where there aren't any branches or any greenery growing in there, so that I'm not damaging the branches. And this tree was one of the very few trees that are leaning over. I thought I planted it correctly, but it might have leaned over a little bit after. Maybe the soil settled a little bit and the tree leaned because of the settling of the soil. That is a possibility, and that can happen. So this stake will not stay on the tree forever. I will leave it there maybe for the first season or for the first couple seasons. Then I'll see how the tree is doing, and then we'll decide what happens then, if it needs staking in a different location or if the stake needs to be removed completely. But usually staking a tree requires about 1 to 2 seasons for it to correct its form. You do not want to keep the stake on the tree forever, because that will weaken the tree, because the tree needs to be exposed to the elements, to the wind, in order to strengthen its trunk. And here I'm showing you the rubber coated ties that I'm using. These are just the soft tomato ties that I use on my tomatoes as well to stake them, because I grow single stemmed tomatoes. It was a little bit tricky getting that soft tie around the branches without damaging any branches or without pushing them out of the way and deforming the shape of the tree. And here you can see kind of where I put the stake and how the stake is tied into the tree with these rubber coated ties. You can see they're pretty secure there, but they don't constrict the tree, and they're loose and soft on the tree. And right here I am taking my loppers and I'm removing all the branches that are hanging over the side where the trees are growing, where the evergreen trees are growing. These are Spartan juniper trees, and they are shade tolerant, but I want to make sure that they will receive the adequate sunlight that they need in order to grow. I do not want them to be hindered by any shade, because the more shade they receive, the slower they will grow. So by removing these branches, I will be making sure that these evergreens will grow rapidly. Of course, I do not want them to grow super rapidly, because that will create weak stems, but I want them to grow rapidly enough to where us and our neighbors would have privacy pretty soon. These trees grow about 18 inches per year, so I think that's kind of a medium growth, and I think that's good enough for an evergreen fence, and it should be able to provide us with some privacy pretty soon. In about 3 years, I would say these trees would be a good privacy hedge for between us and the neighbors. And there were a lot of branches that were hanging over these trees, so I wanted to make sure to prune that lilac to remove all of these branches. And here I'm making sure that the branch does not fall over the trees, on the trees, or on my head. This lilac is pretty old. I believe it was planted when this house was first built, and it has a lot of dead on the inside. Some of its branches are not necessarily dead, but they're on their way there. And there are two lilacs on either side, and the lilac on the opposite side of this one, I actually gave it a severe prune a few years ago, and it took it a couple years to start blooming. But since this lilac was kind of offering us some privacy, I did not want to prune it all the way down because I wanted to maintain that privacy. Also, this lilac has some branches that kind of hang over the driveway and brush against the cars and the trucks that are coming by. And I just wanted to make sure to remove those branches because they can scrape up the cars and the trucks pretty badly. I made sure to leave a good portion of that lilac. I will eventually be trying to move or transplant some of it into different areas of our garden because I do not want it to stay there. Once these trees grow a little bit, then this lilac will have to go. I might try to transplant some of its roots into the back of this area, maybe next year or the year after. There are a few little baby lilacs growing around it. I might just take those and transplant them. And lilacs are actually New Hampshire's plant, I believe, the state plant, and I believe it is the purple lilac that is New Hampshire's state plant, and this is a purple lilac, so I want to make sure to leave these purple blooming lilacs on our property just kind of as a pride of our state because we love our state. And here I am taking a saw and cutting down one of the thick branches that I was not able to cut down with the loppers. These loppers can cut pretty thick branches, and I think I actually use them a little bit over their potential. I cut down pretty thick branches with them, but I don't want to damage them severely, so I'm trying to use the saw to cut down the thicker branches. And I hate using hand saws because they just are not easy to use. They take a lot of force. And here I'm dragging the branches of the lilac to put them over our what will be burn pile. We will of course be moving that burn pile into a different location. We will not be burning it in the driveway because it is surrounded by trees and it's over gravel, and that will cause explosion of the rocks and they'll just go flying everywhere, and we do not want that. Also that day I am watering the trees, so I left the hose on the tree dripping kind of very lightly, and I was moving it every couple hours to a different tree, and it took me about 3 days to water all the trees using this technique, but that allows the trees to be watered deeply and causes their roots to seek down deep down into the soil and stretch out their roots. And this is what I want. You do not want to water your trees in a shallow way because that will create shallow roots. If you want your trees to be resistant to the wind and to form those deep roots to make your trees stand strong in the weather and make them healthy, you want to water them with a deep watering. They do have these water bags that you can put on the side of your tree or around your tree. There are different forms of them, and you can fill those up and they will drip slowly around your tree, the root ball of your tree, and we'll water it throughout the week. It might take a week or maybe longer. I've never had them, but I'm actually thinking of getting some eventually for our fruit trees that are in the front yard. I will also be adding some more fruit trees this season. I purchased a peach and an apricot. Our peach tree is dying and we will be cutting it down because it is planted in the wrong place. That tree was there when we moved in, it is planted in a very wet spot, and peach trees do not like to be planted in wet spots because that causes them to be vulnerable to a lot of diseases and pests. And sure enough, the pests got to it, and the first year I think that we were on the property, I noticed boring insects that laid their eggs in the trunk of the tree, and I was trying to save it, and it was leaning over, and I was able to maintain the life of that tree for almost 8 years, and I think that's pretty good. And we were able to get plenty of peaches off of it, but this year it does not have any peaches, so we will just cut it down, and we are planting another peach tree instead of it, not in the same place of course. We are planting an orchard in our front yard and using that as a way to landscape our garden. And here you can see my chives that are blooming. I love chives, and behind them there is a rose and also the bearded iris that are in bloom, and the pollinators are all over the chives. The bees and the wild bees and everything, all sorts of pollinators love those chives. I've even seen the hummingbirds on the chives, and I just love them so much. I know they can spread. Some people do not like to plant them because they think that they spread rapidly, but if you cut off the blooms as soon as they are done blooming before they go to seed, you will stop them from spreading like crazy because it is those seeds that cause the spreading of the chives. So if you just chop them down right after they bloom, they will flush back again and bloom another time for you, and you just give them also another chop and prevent them from spreading like wildfire because they will do that if you do not remove the blooms. So I actually have to do that. Probably tomorrow I'll be going down to that bed and cutting back the chives so that they do not spread. And right here I am entering the Potager garden, and I have some cut flower seedlings, and most of them sprouted, some did not sprout, what I thought did not sprout. But it turns out there was some sort of a bug that was coming and eating the tops off of the zinnias and some of the other flowers that I planted in there, which is a real bummer. So today, you will not see it in this video, I actually went to that garden again and I removed some of the zinnias that were growing in the same spot. So if I had 2 zinnias or 2 blue flax or whatever it is that I had planted, I would remove one of them and plant it in the location where I did not see anything sprouting. So I'm making sure to give all these zinnias and the blue flax and cosmos, I'm giving them all a good soaking of water because I wanted to make sure that they will sprout. I will need these very soon. I'm using them for a project, and I also want to kind of see how a border around this area would look like, because I eventually want to have a cohesive border on either side of this garden. And here you can see the bees. They are loving the weather. It was actually pretty hot that day. It was probably in the 90s, I think, but the work needed to be done and I could not wait any longer. There was a lot of work that I needed to do, and there's always a lot of work, of course, but that day was a maintenance day. In this shot, you'll see the rhubarb behind me. That's very little. Right now, it's actually grown a lot more. It was struggling last year. It actually died back completely, and there was just one tiny little green nub on it. You can barely see it. And now it's putting on some good, healthy growth and looking almost as good as the rhubarb that you see on the side where I'm watering the cut flowers. Here on this side, I planted some cosmos and some zinnias. I put out a video of all the varieties that I planted in this garden. If you are interested in knowing what varieties I planted, I accidentally planted the cosmos in the back. I should have planted them in the front because they are shorter than what I thought they would be. They are the lemonade cosmos, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and Those grow about 2 feet high or 18 inches high. And right here I am watering the Mago pine. I planted this a few weeks ago and I just wanted to make sure that it gets a good soaking because we didn't have rain for quite a bit. But no worries, now after that spring drought that we had, it's been raining for a good while. It's been raining almost every day for the past 2 weeks. No, for the past week. On this day, I also wanted to make sure that the hosta bed gets all weeded because I haven't been in that bed the whole spring. And it doesn't get a lot of weeds in there, but I do not want the weeds to spread, so I just wanted to make sure to give it a few minutes of love because it definitely needed it. There were all sorts of different weeds growing in there. Some dandelions and barberries and wild roses and all the invasive things that we do not want to grow in there. Now it is shaded, of course, but so they will grow at a much slower rate, which gives me a chance to leave this bed for last and pay attention to the other beds, but it still needs attention, not as much as the rest of the beds that are exposed to sun, but it definitely does need attention. And I love a good shade garden, and this garden is not at all where I want it to be, but I'm so happy with the growth that the hostas have put on in the past couple years. And I actually do not water them at all. They are just kind of on their own. I have also here some lilies of the valley and a few ferns and a bleeding heart. The bleeding heart definitely needs more water. It does not like that spot, I think, unless I water it. I will eventually be hooking this bed on irrigation. I'm not sure when that will happen, but I believe that that tree definitely needs some irrigation, and I need to take that landscaping fabric that is choking the trunk of the tree. I do not like to put landscaping fabric and leave it around the plants. The landscaping fabric that you saw I have around my Spartan junipers is there only for a couple seasons, and I will be removing it because it will eventually begin to choke the trunk of the tree, and also all the nutrients that would be over the landscaping fabric would have a difficult time going into the soil, and the soil beneath the landscaping fabric will be super hard and definitely not full of nutrition. I prefer to put organic matter over it and wood chips and leaf mold and some compost and all the good stuff. But I do not want to do that yet because we do have a lot of invasive things that will choke the Spartan junipers, and I want to make sure that these trees have a good chance at growing and that whatever is beneath that landscaping fabric will die. Also, we have a lot of the invasive stuff on our neighbor's side, so I just want to make sure that they will not choke those trees before they have a chance to grow. And I will have to kind of monitor the things that will come from that side of the property, from our neighbor's side, because there are a lot of invasive things on that side. I did spray their side last year, I believe, and I killed a lot of the stuff that were there, the poison ivy and bittersweet vines and a lot of other things that were invasive and vining. But I cannot keep doing that all the time. You know, we love our neighbors, we don't have any issues with them, but I just want to make sure that the trees are healthy and do not get choked out by all the invasive species. And here my little one is with me, and she had a bug on her. She got scared a little bit, so she screamed out to me. She wanted Mama to help her to get the bug off of her. She's a little sweetie and she loves to help. She helps a little bit, pulls a little bit of weeds, and then she goes playing. She was also collecting some pine cones that fall off from the tree. I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I was trying to say about this tree that I want to put irrigation around it because it does seem like it's not doing very well. One thing that I mentioned earlier is the landscaping fabric. I think that's constricting it, but also I believe that it needs water because it is a dry shade bed, because the tree sucks up all the water and all the nutrients. So I want to remove that landscaping fabric and make sure that the tree gets some good nutrition. Maybe I'll put some compost around it or something, and I will also be putting in irrigation so that the tree looks healthier, because right now it looks like it has a lot of dead in it if you look at it from a distance. So I just want to make sure that it will stay and it will last for a long time to come. This whole area is going to be changing, and I'm going to be making a one giant bed that's going to be engulfing this tree with Muggle Pine and another shrub that I planted in a video that you will be seeing pretty soon, hopefully. And I will be adding in all sorts of different flowering things and some more evergreens in there. I just want this area to look beautiful. It is in the back of our house, but you can also see it from the front. And it will also create some sort of a privacy between us and our neighbors on that side, so that we can both have the feeling of privacy, even though all the trees that were between us are down. Those trees that were on our neighbor's side, I have been watching them for years. It looked like they have been dying slowly. And I believe this past year was their last year, and our neighbors cut them down because they were pretty much dead. They only had a little bit of green at the tippy tops. We have some of those trees on our property as well, in the back of our property, and it looks like they're dying as well. I'm not sure what kind of trees they are. I think they're ash trees, but I could be mistaken. I didn't really look closely at their leaves, and I did not look them up. I'm not that well versed with ornamental trees. I would like to know more about ornamental trees. I think they are beautiful. I love shade trees, but I also love fruit trees because they give us fruits and shade at the same time. In that corner over there, I also found a poison ivy that was growing, so I dug it up. I used a stick. I wasn't wearing my gloves, I think, when I was weeding too, so that was a mistake. But there was a stick in the mulch, because this mulch is wood chips, so I was able to dig the poison ivy with the stick, and I moved it over on the lawn, and it just kind of disintegrates. It wilts and dies. There she comes again. So I make sure to point out to her what is a weed and what is not a weed, and I also make sure to point out to weeds that are kind of far from the plants so that she doesn't accidentally pull a plant. And she loves to help, so I want to give her that opportunity to help. Also, when I do ask my kids to help me with the weeding, I make sure that the area that they are weeding is safe, which means it does not have any plants that can harm them, because we do have stinging nettles and poison ivy and these things in here. So I kind of give the area a quick look over and make sure that it doesn't have any of these things in there. And if I see anything in there, I make sure to point it out to my older kids who are able to understand if I mention that this plant is stinging nettle or poison ivy, that they will make sure to stay away from it and not touch it. And I kind of take the weeds and throw them. I forget most of the time to get a bucket or something to put the weeds in, so I just kind of toss them on the lawn, and then eventually I go back and pick them up. I'm not always very good at going back and picking up the weeds, but I have been trying, because I don't want it to kill the lawn. Not that our lawn is that great, but I want it to look green and beautiful, even though it is natural. And here, this day, my neighbor calls me out while I was working around the tree and weeding with my little one and tells me that there's a snapping turtle on our driveway. So I bring the kids and the camera, and I wanted to make sure to capture this moment for you guys. Every year we have a snapping turtle that comes on our property and lays its eggs on our property. And one year, when the eggs hatched, they ended up going into our garage. So the kids and I took the snapping turtles, the babies, and put them along the creek, which runs across our road and across our neighbor's property, which is where those snapping turtles come from. They also come from the lake that is in our town, and it's always fun to see these animals around. So right here I am fertilizing all of the shrubs and the perennials in the potager garden with some chicken manure that we got from our chickens. This chicken manure has been sitting in the chicken coop for the entire winter, so I felt pretty safe to put it around the plants, and they seem to be doing super well. They are loving it, so it is well aged and it's not going to harm these plants. If you are using chicken manure or any sort of manure or compost around your plants, you want to make sure that that manure or compost is well aged so that it does not burn your plants, because if it is not well aged during the decomposition process, it can burn your plants because it does get hot, and also because the chemicals in it can be too strong or too acidic, or depending on what you are using, and can harm your plants because the decomposition process is not complete. I'm also weeding around the cut flowers to make sure that they do not have any weed competition. And yes, I do jump around between my gardens because I wanted to do one task at a time and focus on one task at a time. So I did not want to go and get the chicken manure and then come back here while I was watering and all that. I just wanted to kind of be done with the watering, and then once I was done with the watering, I saw the bed under the blue cedar and I got distracted with the bed, I suppose, but I thought, you know what, I'm there, why not weed it? And I'm glad I did. And I did not do all these tasks in one sitting. I was taking breaks and I was going inside and making dinner and checking on the kids and all that. And this is on Saturday. I usually do all my filming on Saturday and sometimes on Sunday if we are not visiting family. I'm also right here adding in some chicken manure on my cranberries, and I'm sure they're going to love it because chicken manure is slightly acidic. And these cranberries, I got them this season and they're pretty small, so I just want them to put on some growth. Hopefully next season we will be able to harvest from them. If not, that's okay. I want them to put on some growth and look beautiful in here. I think my husband was also working on the bees behind me. I don't know if you saw him in one of the clips. Those bees are doing great. He was able to do a couple splits on them, I think, this season. Maybe more. I think maybe 3 splits he did. And he wasn't able to do it earlier in the season, so he had to do it a little bit later because the weather was so cold. We were getting temperatures in the 30s and below the 30s well into late May, and right now we are in June and the temperatures are starting to go up. So we're having now finally temperatures in the 70s and the 80s. Even early June we were having some cold temperatures, and now it is starting to feel like summer. Not that I like those temperatures. I do not like the heat, but the plants do. So I'm glad that the weather is starting to warm up a little bit. Unfortunately, I was super late on planting my spring garden just because of all the things that I had to do around our gardens this year. There was a lot of preparation and planting trees and all sorts of things that kind of took away my attention from the vegetable garden. But that's not a big deal because that sort of made space for all the warm weather plants that I wanted to plant in there anyways. And I still have the chance to plant some cold weather crops like kale and Swiss chard and things of the sort, and beets and all those. I can still plant them right now. The heat will not bother them. These plants can survive in all sorts of different weather, which is wonderful because I need some grace in the garden. Today I was also actually able to get into the Potager garden or cottage garden and do a little bit more weeding in there. There were tons of Asian cilantro that just seeded itself everywhere. This stuff is pretty vigorous in here. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's there and it just seeds itself everywhere. I do need to remulch this area so that I do not have this problem. But for now, I will be using the mulch that we got from the pine tree and the juniper around the fruit trees in the front and around the butterfly garden and also in front of the living fence that I created earlier this spring, because I will eventually be planting a small garden, or small, a smallish garden in that area. Small in comparison to the rest of the gardens. The hibiscus finally put on some growth, and I was able to cut down the old growth, and I also gave it some chicken manure. And today I was working around it and it looks really healthy. I think it really likes that chicken manure. Today I also went in that garden and I planted some different types of squash. I thought I had butternut squash seeds. My plan was to plant a whole lot of butternut squash seeds in this garden because I want them to kind of act as weed inhibitors because of all their leafy growth that they will put out, and I want them to grow over the ground. And they naturally also act as weed inhibitors because I believe they put out some sort of a chemical. I'm not super confident about that. I think the leaves themselves, they're super large and they just block all the sunlight and prevent weeds from growing. So it will be good to put them in there for now because I will be getting plants slowly to plant in this garden. I cannot just buy everything all at once or grow everything all at once to plant in this garden. So whether I grow it from seed or whether I buy plants, it will have to be added in slowly because this is a large area. I would also like to go over my design again and see what plants I originally decided to plant in here, whether I'm going to stick with them or maybe choose something else. Originally, I was thinking of planting some carnivorous plants, and then I thought about it again. We have bees in there, and I do not want them eating the bees. So that will not happen here, unfortunately, but it was a cool thought having a carnivorous plant. I think it seems like a far-fetched idea because they seem like such tropical plants, but I was looking at the different types of carnivorous plants, and there are some of them that are actually perennials in zone 5. So if you are interested, just look up carnivorous plants, do a quick Google search, and you'll find some that are perennials in zone 5. Here's a close-up of that hibiscus. You can see some of the growth that it put on at that time I was filming the video. This is the Berry Awesome Hibiscus. On the picture, it looks like it has a much darker bloom than it actually does. I think the one that has a darker bloom is the Midnight Hibiscus. I'm not confident about that, but I wish I got the darker bloom one. This one works too, though. It is very beautiful. I love the foliage. It has the reddish tint in it and the green. It's sort of a red variegation in there, and I wanted that element of red in the garden in this area. Now for your hibiscus, you want to make sure to not cut the growth too early or cut it in the fall because they have hollow stems and the water can get into the stems and can rot the hibiscus plant. so the plant might not come back for you. So make sure to wait until you start seeing a little bit of growth on the plant. It doesn't have to be as much as I have over here, but just enough to where you are confident that this plant is starting to put on some growth, and that's when I would suggest to cut back that growth, especially if you live in a moist environment. We get a lot of rain in our area, not this year in the spring, unfortunately, but usually we do, and I just want to make sure that these plants do not rot, because I love hibiscus. I think it's a beautiful plant. It grows like a bush, but it's a perennial. It's amazing. If you are new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell to receive notifications of whenever I upload new videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. I'll be leaving a few videos for you to watch until next time. I hope that you enjoyed this video and you learned something new. Bye!